evening, Internet. I want to bring you a quick tutorial. I just finished a coaching session and we talked about the session that this image came from, and I'm going to finish this edit right quick. We went from Lightroom to Photoshop, and by the time this makes it onto Instagram Reels, I'm not sure how long the video will be. Obviously no longer than 90 seconds, so you might see a time lapse of some of this, but I just wanted to be able to kind of show you a little bit of what editing looks like to finalize an image from Lightroom into Photoshop, doing a little flyaway cleanup here. And you know, I'll probably work this in Premiere to do kind of a time-lapse effect and get the audio over the different changes that get made. But the thing I want to highlight here is that I'm not talking about when people throw around the term Photoshop. The reality is, like I'd say 99% of the work I do is very subtle, small changes to an image. You don't want your images to be tacky in the way that viewer sees them and can pick out and identify noticeably what it is that changed about the image. It should look so natural that anything that gets changed still remains in a natural state. Your eye, the viewer's eye, would have never known that these flyaways aren't here. So it's a perfectly acceptable edit to make. These are natural freckles and moles on a person's face. You don't go removing all of that. That's just who people are. So you don't remove those things. Got a couple of blemishes in the hair here we're going to fill in. Let's go ahead and get those. And then we're just doing slight blemishes where tonality in the skin is uneven. And these come from various kinds of things, you know, just natural light in a room and the way that cameras and through editing and Lightroom and adding presets, certain shadows and blemishes and things get accentuated. So we're just doing some really subtle cleanup here. Get some of this hair off the nose. I think this image was shot at ISO 800 with Canon 85. Just doing some general cleanup here. We'll get some hair and lint off of the shirt. Got a little piece on the pants down here. I'm trying to keep what I'm working on in the center of the screen. For when you crop it, when I crop it to a vertical ratio for Instagram Reels. Alright, so you see where just the natural curve of the head causes the hair. I don't see that looks funky. We're not going to do that. I don't really like the way that's turning out, so I would rather leave it the way that it is than mess with it and make it look unnatural. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it alone for now. Try one more attempt in small sections, subtle, unnoticeable to the human eye unless you saw me do them. Now, a few more. Watch what I'm going to do to the hair here using the liquify tool. I'm going to even out the hairline against the background. Very subtle movements. My pressure was turned up too high. I'm going to start over here. I have my pressure now set to about 17. Very subtle. If you have your pressure turned up too high, it starts warping the hair. And you don't want that. Move that to the center of the screen. I'm just going to kind of push in this extra hair right here. You don't want to have the pressure turned up too high. You'll start warping the pixels and they start looking funny. Just pushing this in a little bit so it's a little less obvious. Very subtle movements. A little bigger here. Notice I'm starting to pull the edge of the frame away from the photograph. I can fix that here in a second. I'll show you how to do that. Cool. All right, that's looking pretty good. So then I just pull this back against the edge of the frame. All right, I think I'm done with the liquify tool. and you can see the changes that were made there. Now I'm going to come back with the clone stamp tool and clean up some of these pixel stretches. I'm going to pull my opacity back up to around 85, 90. There we go, cool. I'm going to fix some tonality in the skin here using the clone stamp tool, having my opacity down at 27 and hardness set to 0. And I'm going to use a broad enough brush that it's sampling from a large portion of skin here because it's a very broad correction. And I'm just clicking Option for the source of where it's going to pull from. And I'm replacing and fixing the skin there. You see and right here in the chin of our gentleman here, kind of softening that up. Nothing too abrasive. We're going to fix a little bit of this harsh shadow here from the side light that's coming slightly from the side and behind. Cool. Real subtle movements. A little tonality fix here in the skin for some of these shadows. See where underneath the eye is lighter than the cheekbone. I'm going to even that out by sampling from the dark area. And here I'm going to sample from the light area and overlay the dark just to even out the skin tone there across the nose. You don't want it to look fake, right? So very small, subtle movements, keeping your opacity turned down softly so you can make keystrokes freely without ruining anything and going overboard. Subtle, subtle, subtle. Right there, here we go. And I'm just sampling from right around the area where the change is being made. And we don't want to go crazy on we don't want the skin to look too soft. It starts looking fake. So we deal with very small changes. And I'm holding the Option button to sample from an area and then click around it. Sample from an area, click around it. Sample from an area, click around it. Right here at the cheekbone, right here at the temple of the head. Cool. All right, it's looking pretty good to me. I'm going to fix up some of these hairs right here. All right. All right. Let's see what we got going here. All right. Final thing I'm going to do is, well, not final. That's not true. Not the final thing. Let me go to the tilt shift tool here. I'm going to add a little tilt shift to our image. This helps add kind of a depth of field effect, but please don't go overboard with it. You want it to be really natural. You don't want to, right now I have the blur set to 15 pixels. The distortion's at 0. And I do add a grain under the noise effect over here to the side. Let me drag this over so we can see 15. And let me drag this noise over here. You can see my noise settings for the grain. And the amount is going to be anywhere from 5 to 11. And that only applies the grain in the area that the tilt shift is being added. So this area between the two white bars is receiving no tilt shift effect, and the fall off effect starts to the right of this bar and to the left of this bar. And I'm going to increase the blur right quick just so you can see where it stops and starts. So that's overboard, and then we're going to keep that at about 12 to 15. I like 15 is nice. It's a real natural fall off, and it adds a grain in this area to the right and this area to the left. And I'm going to click OK. It's going to do its thing. And the last element I'm going to add before we're done with this image that I call the sauce. It adds contrast, a little hue saturation. I'll turn it off and on. You can see it desaturates the orange in the skin just a bit. Very subtle desaturation of the oranges, and adds a little contrast and brightness. Very subtle. And it also adds a fine grain over the whole image for a nice, very fine not too rough grain effect. Very natural looking. And there we go. We have it. There's a final image.